Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Janet's Planet. We've got a fun evening for you this evening. First of all, I'd like to discuss the movie I went to watch last night, Unplanned. Seriously, everybody needs to go and watch the movie. The whole family, the kids, mum, dad, everybody. It's unbelievable. And what's so amazing is it wasn't really advertised at all, and yet last weekend it came in number 6. So seriously, you have to watch this movie. Again, it's just another thing that we've all been lied to about. You know, the world tells us Father Christmas is real. Obviously, we know he's not. And it's the same about abortion. We discussed this before. The world tells you it's okay. It's nothing. It's not. It's a big deal. But seriously, let's watch the clip right now, this movie. Unbelievable.
Is in the other room.
Here.
Our first order of business is to present Planned Parenthood's Employee of the Year Award. Abby Johnson.
This is Abby. She's our newest volunteer escort. Abby, this is Cheryl's Alessandro.
I'd be the youngest director in Planned Parenthood history.
You'll actually be in charge of the abortions at your clinic?
I have a chance to make a real difference.
No matter what you do for the rest of your life, you're still gonna be a baby killer.
The only thing that's changed is you, Abby. Can you even hear yourself talk right now about these procedures? These are little babies.
I'm not going to apologize for doing a job that helps women in crisis.
There's still a part of me that isn't sure.
I know. But the one thing that all experts agree on is that at this stage, the fetus can't feel anything.
Sorry to bother you, but they need an extra person in the back room. Are you free?
I saw it. It was like it was twisting and fighting for its life.
We commend the souls of these hundreds of children. And Lord, we pray to end abortion.
I really appreciate what you've done for us. I'll not forget it.
22,000 abortions. How do I even comprehend that?
Rough day at the office.
You can say that.
It's your dad and me. You are our baby from the moment of conception.
We are paying you to be a perfect instrument of corporate policy. We are an abortion provider.
I can't be a part of this anymore. Everything that they told us is a lie.
Don't underestimate the repercussions of this. You gotta be careful.
Rhonda, please, don't do this! Rhonda!
Let me tell you what's gonna happen if you walk through that door.
Congratulations. You've made an enemy of one of the most powerful organizations on the planet.
Absolutely amazing. So that's Abby Johnson's story, played by Ashley. Absolutely amazing. And what's amazing is abortion cannot be made safe. Somebody always has to die. And that's the truth. And what's amazing is they've, like I say, rated it R. So at 15, you can legally have an abortion without your parents knowing, but you can't go and watch this movie. It's the world, right? Totally blows my mind. Anyway, I would like to right now thank Yoda's Restaurant, because without Yoda's Restaurant, we wouldn't be here this evening. Thank you so much for sponsoring this show. If you're looking for a good piece of chicken and a great pie, then Yoda's Restaurant's the place. They've also actually just opened a prayer room right attached to Yoda's Restaurant, so it's all-you-can-eat chicken and a prayer. Right, now on to my favourite part of this show. I have got Dr. David Sutton in the house with me this evening. David, welcome. Oh, my.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This man totally changed my life many, many, many years ago. I don't even know if he remembers, but I had a friend that had some addictions, and I heard on the local radio that David Sutton had a class that was actually starting that week. So I took my friend along and introduced you to them. And I'll never forget, you sort of looked me up and down, and you said, "Do you know you're sicker than them?" And I said, "Excuse me?" You said, "You're sicker than them." And I'm like, "What are you on about?" They said, "You know, somebody that has an addiction will take a pill or a drink and know that they're going on a trip. You go with them and you don't know whether you're going for a day, a month, a week, 20 years. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I did the class. I cried for 2 classes. I was so like, I couldn't believe that I was as sick as I was myself. I really thought I was going to help the world. But seriously, until you've helped yourself, you can't help anybody.
That's right.
So I cried through the first 2 classes, and then, in fact, I stayed I think I went through your program twice. My life was changed forever, and I want to thank you for that. Seriously, you really made me wake up. I didn't like it, but you shared the truth, and we're still friends, right?
We're still friends, yeah.
So I want to share with you David's approach. David has quite a few books out, but one of them is the principle approach. It's a 12-step approach to the principles of life. What's the difference in this and the 12-step principles that everybody knows about?
Well, this is founded and written out of those 12-step principles, because I use those personally when I got free from alcohol and drugs 38 years ago. And so these steps have been around long before I was around, and they're in a variety of different kinds of programs. And the whole idea is that you go through the process of those steps. And there's a difference between the way they approach it and the way I approach it a little bit. The steps are really the rules. These are the rules of how you go about getting sober. These are the rules of how you're going to break this cycle. And they've been proven. Millions of people have used them in a variety of different programs, different applications. But for me, it seemed like there was something lacking. Rules are made to be broken. And I had been a rule breaker my whole life. That's how I ended up in the mess that I was in, because I broke every rule that there was. It was not a surprise at all. When I encountered a list of rules, the first thing I did was balk at that. And actually in the writings, in the original writings, it says, you know, it's some of these rules, some of these things, we balked at it. Well, I did. I didn't want to have anybody to tell me what to do. Most addicts and alcoholics don't. And codependents, like you were talking about at the beginning, they're even worse. They don't want anybody to tell them what to do. There's a difference between people that are rebellious and people that have extreme rebellion.
Yeah.
Rebellious people are resistant to somebody telling them what to do. People with extreme rebellion, I was planning on doing that. Now that you told me, I'm not going to do it. So we go to the next level. So rules are made to be broken. And in life, if you run into a rule, the rule got broken, there may or may not be a consequence. But the next level to that is principles. You run into a principle, principles don't break. You do. And in the addictions world, I violated principle after principle after principle in the way that I lived. And my life was in utter chaos. Those principles crushed my life until my life was completely broken. And in the addiction world, we call that hitting bottom. We hit bottom. Well, hitting bottom is when my addiction is progressing faster than I can lower my standards. And so I couldn't lower my standards fast enough to keep ahead of my addiction, and I hit bottom. And actually, I went through that process a lot of times. I was 19 the first time I tried to get really genuine, tried to get sober. I was 27 before I got it. And part of that journey, going back into my addiction, coming out, going back into my addiction, coming out, and part of it, I learned a lot, but I didn't really figure it out until I had an old guy talk to me about principles. He said, you don't understand the principles. The goals of the processes, the 12-step process, is not just that we do the activity and that I've gone through the activity. The goal is that I can embrace those principles. Principles are what changes your life. When I accept principle into my life, then that changes me completely. So at the beginning, what's the difference between the way I approach it and the way traditional programs approach it? Well, there's a compatibility. There's an intertwining, there's a blending. I just take it to another level. And really, a lot of the people that are of the variety like I am, you know, I do know a lot of folks, they found Jesus and they never went back to it. But of the variety that I am, I took Jesus with me. We went out a few times and got drunk. I mean, I just take him back out into the world, because the truth of the matter was, that wasn't what got me free. Because I was just as rebellious after I found the Lord as I was before. You remember there was a verse that, and I don't want to get preachy, but There's a verse that said, we work out our salvation with fear and trembling. I wasn't working out my salvation with fear and trembling. I wasn't working it out at all. And when I started to work it out, it was with arrogance and pride that I was I'm going to work my own program. And so there came a time that I had to do something different. So this was what I used to get sober on.
Let's go through a few of these principles here. Number one, admit that we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become completely unmanageable.
It says we admitted. There's a collective voice of reason. In my state, I was not honest on the inside. I was not honest with me.
No.
As a matter of fact, after I got sober, I was more dishonest than I was before. We build in addiction, we build a wall around our addiction, and we lie to everybody about everything to protect our addiction. I don't want you too close to me. I don't want you interfering with how I drink. I don't want you interfering with how I use. And so we build those lies to mask our addiction. And when we talk about alcohol and drugs, we mask that addiction, and we're really masters at it. But there are some that on another level that are more deceptive even yet. If we ever address the pornography addiction, well, that's a higher level. If we address the gambling addiction, we go to a higher level. We address codependency. I think they're less honest than anybody because they don't even know themselves that there's something going on.
Yeah.
And when we talk about addictions, if in fact in the United States we were to ever address the food addiction, even in the church realm, if we were to address the food addiction, we close half the restaurants in town. And we don't want Troyer's, of course, to close because it's a wonderful restaurant. But there are people that have that food addiction, and they're more deceived than the alcoholic. The alcoholic can see the destruction over on the food side or in the people that smoke. You don't see the destruction as much. So when we talk about this first part, we have to admit that there's something wrong with us, and that it has affected every part of our life. It's not that there's something wrong with me and I have a little bit of a challenge here, a little bit of challenge. No, I've got something wrong with me, and my whole life has been impacted by it.
But that's everybody. I mean, everybody has got something wrong with them. There's no perfect person, right?
Well, yeah. So when we talk about step number one, the first entry point to recovery from any kind of addiction or other life problems.
Yeah.
If we really get serious about it, other life problems follow the same pattern. It's about being honest.
Yeah.
So self-honesty is what we're trying to arrive at. I can tell you, after I got sober, I would lie when the truth would help me. If I'd have just told the truth, it'd have been better. But I made stuff up because I didn't know how else to function. And I worked on being honest, and I worked on being honest, and I worked on being honest, and I was not one whit more honest than I was at the beginning. As a matter of fact, now I can remember what it was I was saying, and I might even been more dishonest. I learned the next principle up from that. When we talk about honesty, the next principle is called truth. If I can get some dimension of honesty and begin to assimilate truth, truth is external from me. Honesty is internal, or dishonesty is internal. So truth is on the outside of me. People go to recovery meetings, people go to a psychologist, people go to church. We find a body, an assemblage of truth that's greater than ourselves, and we assimilate that truth. When I assimilated truth about addiction, going to recovery programs and going to church, I started getting truth on the inside of me. When I got truth on the inside of me, the byproduct was I became honest.
But there's your truth, there's my truth, and then God is all truth. So again, it's...
Well, when we talk about your truth, my truth, I try not to go there. There are some absolutes. I know in the world that we live in, we don't like to talk about absolutes. But when I first found recovery, they had 4 absolutes: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. And they called them the absolutes.
Yeah.
You have to, there at some point, if you want to have a change, if you're wanting to break the cycle of addiction, there's got to come up some absolutes. Or, we can talk, and I talk in other steps about it, a moral standard. You cannot approach this entire process and feel like you can ignore the moral standard. And maybe your moral standard is a little different than mine, or your truth is a little different than mine. There's a common ground that we have learned, that I have learned in my walk and in my education and in my years of working this process. There's a common ground. There are truth about alcoholics and drug addicts and other people in addiction that are common to everybody in addiction.
Wow, the truth. Number 2, you shared a story the other night, I loved it. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And the other night you shared a story about when were you sane or when were you not insane. That was brilliant.
Well, in that process, the step number 2, or this process, is really, the principle is hope. We look at hope. I gain hope from people. I have to find people that are filled with hope, and when I'm around them, I look at, even just looking at them, there's a transmitting of that hope. If you're around people that are hopeless all the time, you become just like them. You'll all be sitting at IHOP eating pancakes, you know, going, I'm overweight. I wish I wouldn't. Well, that's because you've hung around people that are hopeless. When I was an alcoholic, we'd sit in the bar, and we were all hopeless. And so, birds of a feather. We used to talk about, there was a giant stool magnet. It was a butt magnet. And when you sat your butt down there, they flipped the magnet on, and you couldn't get your butt off that bar stool for nothing. You were stuck there. Well, we were hopeless. We sat and daydreamed about what would be or what could be or what might happen, and we live within a fantasy world. Hope is a reality. There's hope comes from what we see. And so when we look at that, how do I get the sanity back? The insanity of addiction becomes apparent to everybody else. But the insanity of addiction for me was that I had nobody in my life at all. At the end of my drinking, I had nobody. I'd shut the whole world out. And so there was no catalyst. There was no way for hope to ever really reach me. And if you had hope, I got rid of you. I didn't want you around. So when we look at that principle of hope, that there's something greater than me can restore me back to sanity. That means it kind of smacks in the face of some people that believe you're born an addict, you're born an alcoholic. I think it's a cop-out. You may have been born with characteristics or traits, or you may have a family history, and I don't deny that part of it, but I was not born an alcoholic. I was not born insane. I might have been born with some of that. I grew up in an environment that was not conducive to quality mental health. I will tell you that, you know. And most of the recovery rooms are not the picture of mental health. These are people with problems. And most of the churches are not the picture of mental health. These are people with problems. So I have this idea that I wasn't born that way. This was something that developed over a period of time. The lack of hope, the walls that I put up, the isolation that I lived in, came from this posture of distrust, that I didn't trust anybody, and I didn't want to trust anybody. I didn't want you to interfere in my addiction. So when we talk about that, you can't restore something. I didn't write that, but to restore you to sanity, you can't be restored to something that you weren't originally. So if you restore an old car, I like it, Meckham auctions. I like it, these cars, they restore them, and they actually make them better than they were. You restore something that had to have an original car in order to restore a car. And so the restoration process comes, and when we begin to restore, we restore hope to people. And that's really what I do when I teach classes. I restore hope to people. You laugh. You might as well laugh at yourself.
Well, that's why I cried and laughed all the way through. And I say to people, when you go to a Dr. David Sutton class, you will laugh and you will cry. It's like Comedy Central. I mean, what better way to go through any program laughing in your tears?
Well, it's like Comedy Central without the profanity. We don't do that so much. But it's the way I look at it is, if you can't find a way to laugh at yourself, it's probably because you have not gotten really honest with yourself. Because if you get honest with yourself, you'll see how ridiculous you look. And so there comes a place where God, this power greater than me, and we kind of mask that a little bit at that point, can restore me to sanity? Yeah. If in fact I'm honest about what I have. The walls of denial, D-E-N-I-A-L, don't even notice I am lying. Denial. Denial is refusing to know what I already know. So we already know we have a problem. We just refuse to acknowledge that. So when it comes into that place of hope, I connect with other people, and they don't put up with my nonsense. They don't put up with my lies. And if you genuinely love somebody, you'll call them on their stuff.
Yeah.
And most codependent people, you know, in the addiction world, the alcoholic drug addict, we call them the egomaniac with the inferiority complex.
Yep, isn't that the truth?
And in the codependency side, we call them the control freak doormat.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of divergent ideals. One side, I have to control everything. The other side, everybody walks over top of me.
Yeah.
One side, I'm an egomaniac. I'm all about me. The other side, I feel like I'm worthless.
Yeah.
And so we have separated our personality, and we've gone into two different directions at one time.
Yeah.
To get hope, you got to have somebody call you on your
2
stuff.
chicks and no dog, right?
That's 2 chicks and no dog. That's a good
But
way to put it.
I remember coming to your class. First, I'd just come to and was devastated that I was as sick as I was. And then I turn up at your class, and you stand there and you're saying, for you guys that are here looking for a date, you're sicker than you think you are. And you said, new girls, just put them away because we don't want to see them. I mean, it was like, what have I arrived to? I thought I was so much better. I was devastated.
Well, I tell the
thought-
guys, I say, early in recovery, the possibilities of a relationship, you know, the odds are good, but the goods are odd, and you have to be at the beginning of relationship. You're not even in a relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
How can you build a relationship with somebody else?
Yeah.
And if in fact you're sober like a month or two and you're going to get into a relationship, I can guarantee the person you're getting into a relationship is sicker than you are.
Yes,
And the
absolutely.
way that I know that is they're attracted to you.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be attracted to you unless they were really whacked.
Exactly. Well, just know I've not been in a relationship for a very long time.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Tried now and again.
Now, what you do, you have to get, the first year, you have to get a plant. If you can keep
Oh,
a
it's been
plant,
many years.
If you can
Many
keep if you
years.
can keep a plant alive for 1 year, then you get a pet. And if you can care for a pet for 2 years, then you're allowed to go on a date, and then skip over a couple of years.
Oh, wow. I missed the doggy part out then. Right, I'll go and get a pet. I do want to get one of those little teacup doggies. I think that would be a nice idea.
Sure.
But no, it is the truth. Until you're okay alone, then it's best that you stay alone because it's not a fun place to be.
2.5 people don't make a whole relationship.
Oh, no, it can be really ugly. Now, number 3, made a decision to turn our lives and our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him.
So our will and our lives, when we surrender, even if you're in the church realm and you surrender and you find Christ, or we're going to turn our will and life over to the care of God, as we understand Him or understood Him, the idea is it's not as I understand Him. It's not a God of my fabrication. It's a God that was understood by the people that are here sober. So there's somebody I'm sure will get hate mail, but it's all right. So we make a decision to turn our will and life over. This is not an advocation of responsibility. This is not abandoning ship and believing God's going to do all of these things for me. You can surrender your life all day. God will not pay your power bill. The truth of the matter is, God will help you get healthy so you can get a job and pay your own power bill.
Yeah.
God will prosper you, but you have to take the steps. So when we look at that, I surrender my will and my life. It's not me surrendering my responsibility, and God cares about it. To God's care, He cares about every part of my life. He cares about my physical health. He cares about my wallet. He cares about my relationships. He cares about every part of my life. And so the whole idea is I'm going to surrender my life and believe. This is where faith comes in. And the third principle is really about faith. This is where faith arrives, that I'm going to begin to believe that God can come and intervene and straighten my life out. And He will empower my life. Not that He's just going to do this all for me, because it doesn't work that way, but God will come and empower my life that I can have the great life that I always wanted. You know, the life beyond your wildest dreams. Well, it's available. But you can't arrive there in human power. You need divine power.
Wow, unbelievable. I mean, and it's so difficult when you can't see it, when you're in the dark.
Right.
With all the problems that you have in the world and everything, you just can't see a way out of it. But is amazing is once you step up and start the process, then that's where he meets you in it.
In faith, there's enough light for those that want to find it, and there's enough shadows for those that are trying to resist it. So I'm not here trying to sign somebody up.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, we just simply present faith. I present the relationship with God that I have. I just present it to people. And if it's something that you want, you'll come that direction. If you have something else you want to do, go do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And if you run out of options over there and it doesn't seem to work, then come back.
Yeah.
I always say in the class, you don't have to believe like I believe. You have the right to be wrong. So there comes a place.
Sutton.
There comes a place.
And equally, God gives you free will, so he's not going to take it. And it's not
That's
right for
correct.
anybody else to take anybody's
That's
free
right.
will. But when you're sick and tired, like you said, of being sick and tired, then there's a place to go. Where actually would somebody go? Where can we recommend? If somebody's watching this right now and they want to get well, what would you recommend they do? I mean,
Well, if they want to come to one of my classes, we have a
which
series.
I highly recommend. I've never been the same since.
We have a series going on now in Englewood at the Event Center in Englewood, down on McCall Road, and I can't give you the address, but that's on Monday nights, and we're just now coming. This week will be in our third week, and so that's one way you can find us. There's a lot of great programs around. A lot of people have wonderful, wonderful options. This process, the process that we talk about, works. And one of the things that we're going to be doing this year with this book, actually, we've already accepted the invitation, made the trip plan. We're on our way to Latvia.
Wow.
And when I was invited to go to Latvia, I said, well, where's Latvia? And he said it was by Estonia, like I would know. And I said, oh, good. I guess I wasn't that much of a study of geography. I had to go home and look it up on the map. But it's in the Baltic region, former Soviet Union nations. And we're going to Latvia. I'm going to speak for 2 weeks over there, teaching addictions recovery all over the nation. And we've actually had the book translated now into Latvian. And what a marvelous opportunity to carry a message of hope and recovery to a very kind of an oppressed people. There's a lot of alcoholism, a lot of vodka addiction, and the people of Latvia, we're excited about going there.
Wow. I mean, I smile now because I've been through the program. It was many years ago. I mean, I'm still working my program on a regular basis, so it's funny now, but it really wasn't going through it. I mean, it was very difficult, actually. And once you start working on your own self, you don't have time to worry about what other people are doing, because it's not easy to be focused on what you're doing each and every day and doing the right thing. I just want to let you know, we're going to put all this up on the Facebook page, but if you'd like to sponsor David, like he says, he's going off to Latvia. The books are all going.
Latvia.
All right. Latvia. Really? Latvia.
We knew you wouldn't get that right. That's okay. That's okay.
But seriously, David has a P.O. Box. P.O. Box 3917, Sarasota, Florida, 34230. And if you want to help out and take, you know, his books and him over there with us, then that would be wonderful. But that will all be up on the Facebook page. You can help do that. Right, let's go to number 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. How would one do that?
The moment that you get clarity and you discover that you're empowered now, there's something outside of you that's empowering you to move forward in life. Now you have to take an inventory. The first 3 steps are actually the discovery steps. Steps 4 through 9 are the recovery steps. And 10 and 11 and 12 are the maintenance steps. That's how you maintain this. So step 4 is the beginning of the recovery process. We make an inventory of our life. There are tons of workbooks out there and tons of processes, and everybody has a little different slant on it. I agree with everybody. It's all great. Do it. It doesn't matter to me how somebody does that inventory, but I begin to take a serious, fearless look at myself. I have to take a look at how I've lived my life. I have to take a look at who I've damaged, who I've brought into this mess with me, you know, where I've been wrong and where I've been right. It's an inventory of my life from the beginning to the end. What does my life represent now? Because if you do a 4-step and you do a thorough 4-step, you get all the skeletons out of the closet, first of all. The second part of it is you reassess and find out what your purpose really is. Why am I here? I don't want recovery that has no purpose.
Yeah.
If my life doesn't have purpose, then just to give up alcohol or give up drugs and still remain without purpose. In my active addiction, I didn't have a purpose. I didn't have any reason to go from one thing to the next. It was just random occurrence. Well, now if I can do an inventory and find out really what is my purpose in life? Why was I placed here? Some people they have a purpose. They're to start a business and run a business. Some people are to be a sports figure. There are people that have purpose in life. When I didn't have purpose, then my life really fell flat. It was always meaningless. Even in the times that I got sober, it was just meaningless.
Yeah.
And I know people today that have never had an addiction problem, never came across any of that. They have all the money that they could possibly spend in multiple lifetimes, and their life is meaningless. They feel empty and they feel void, and we see that all the time. We see people that just fall into that trap.
But the thing is, too, they're living, most of them, for this world and not the next. I mean, we're here this much time. You can have everything here if that's all you want, you know.
Right.
But if you're going for the next one, then it's different. I want to just take this time to thank Yoda's Restaurant for sponsoring this program. Thank you so much. And if you're looking for a great piece of chicken or a wonderful piece of pie, then that's the place to go. They also have a prayer room, so you can have all the chicken you can eat and a prayer. How about that? Yoda's Restaurant, wonderful place to be. And thank you. Thank you. What are we on next? The next one, David. Where are we up to next? The other thing I was just thinking about, something you once shared a story about how that you got a job in an office and wondered what you were doing there. Do you remember that story?
No.
You don't? How that even...
Well, I have a lot of stories.
Exactly, from when you were drinking, you found yourself in certain situations, like a top job, for instance,
right,
where you would take your motorbike out at lunchtime for a drink. Do you ever remember that story?
I do remember that story, yeah. The truth of the matter was, I could attain certain things in life.
Which people are doing now.
Yeah, I had a natural ability to sell myself, and so I could go and get a job, and I could go get a big job even. But it was never as important as my drink. And that particular story, I was working for a company up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but they didn't know that. Later they found out. But I was the boss, so I would come in to work and just check and make sure everybody was working, and the secretary would put a bank deposit together, and about 10 o'clock I'd go to the bank, and then I'd go to the keg and bottle, and I'd sit at the keg and bottle for 3 or 4 hours, and then I'd come back, check on everybody, and make sure that they were doing what they were supposed to do. That was I did this for a while. One day, the guy in the next building was selling his motorcycle, and I was always a motorcycle enthusiast, and so I decided that in my drinking, when I saw something was for sale, I was always going to buy. I bought everything, and I took it for a ride, a test drive, but I guess I had forgotten that I'd just spent the last 4 or 5 hours sitting at the tavern, and I wrecked that motorcycle, and they hauled me away in an ambulance, and I found myself that afternoon, I don't know, maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when I'm supposed to be closing up the plant. I found myself laying in the emergency room, and I'd almost decapitated this arm, and my collarbone was up here, and my shoulder was like down here, and I was laying there, and they wouldn't give anything for pain because I was still drunk, and they just let me lay there, and I was laying there on that table, and I was thinking in my mind, you know, something's got to change. Something's got to be different. This is no way to live. And right there and then I swore off motorcycles for the rest of my life. You know, we're not going to approach this alcohol thing. No, it was the motorcycle's fault.
I'm not going to do motorbikes ever again.
And I've kind of held to that. I have lots and lots of friends. I've rode some, but I have lots of friends that have bikes, and it's wonderful. And I get around them, and it's kind of like being around the person that's hopeless. You become hopeless. You get around the person with hope. You have lots of hope. I get around the guys with Harleys. I want to buy a Harley. And then usually somebody wrecks one about that time, and I go, I don't want to buy a Harley. So
you also shared the other night a story about the drugs that everybody's taking, and how that if you're going to go out, then make sure you take is it Novocaine or something you were talking about? Oh, that's fascinating. That.
Well, currently the heroin, people that get on heroin, the heroin is laced with fentanyl, and if you overdose on that, on the high levels of narcotics, the only thing that's actually really going to keep you from dying, and a lot of them die,
Yeah.
and they've actually all their life cycle has shut down, and they shoot them with Narcan and bring them back, and that has a benefit, I suppose, but it becomes part of the extension of the deception that the person has. Well, if I overdose, they'll just shoot me with Narcan and I'll be all right anyhow.
Yeah.
And it's like it extends it out to one more level. I've had lots of people that I've been close to that have overdosed. And it's really interesting. People that are ready to get sober, people are ready, they're ready to surrender it all. This time I'm going to do this for real. This time I'm going to get clean and sober. I'm going to get my family back on track. I'm going to do all these things. And they get in their mind, I have one more run left.
Yeah.
I got one more good run. You know what? I'm going to go out. Tomorrow I'm going to be sober. So I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out tonight and have one more run. I had a dear friend of mine that I'd been working with for years.
We're running out of time. You're going to have to come back.
Well, we might be able to
You're
do
gonna
that.
have to
but
come back.
that overdose thing is very real and it's very dangerous.
Oh, I love you. Thank you so much for joining us. We're out of time, but David will come back and share with us. Thank you ever so much. Make some great choices because you do matter and everything does count. So thank you for joining us this evening. We'll be back.